Welcome to Sports Greatest Rivals. My name is Brendan McGilligan. I'll be hosting this episode, and this week we are doing the Manchester Derby. So we're looking at the two biggest clubs in Manchester, one in red, one in blue. So we've got Salford and Stockport. But moving on from there, no. So basically, it is Man United v Man City, and with that, we've got a guest. I'll introduce the first guest. It is the Man City fan. We managed to find one. His name is Joe Farrell. He is born and raised in the rough streets of Manchester. Moved away to Abu Dhabi for a while, mainly when the club was bought over by the United Arab Emirates. He wanted to experience life over there. Came back, experienced all the glory of Manchester City now. Joe, nice to meet you.
Hello. It was technically Dubai, but 20
Oh,
minutes away from Abu Dhabi.
all the same country. Um, and represent United, we've got Ricey from the rough streets of Leicester. Born and raised in Stratford, obviously. No, so he's Irish, as you can guess by the accent that will come out of his mouth. Um, and so you're representing United. How are you, Ricey?
Not too bad, Brendan. How you doing?
How long has the United fandom been? Was it passed down through the colleagues that you've talked to on the streets, or was it TV, as everyone does in Ireland?
I suppose following United, lad, like most people, you kind of get it handed to you by your parents if you have someone who's interested in it, or maybe an uncle or someone like that. For me, it was my father. He was introduced me to supporting United. It was, I suppose, after the 2002 World Cup that Ireland qualified is when I really got into football
Hmm.
and really started taking an interest in it. And those are like kind of my first memories of United is that early 2000s, and that's we'll kind of go on to talk about the derby itself is one to have a remember of is
Did you
2002.
did you get into it because of Roy Keane's performances at the World Cup?
Yeah. Getting home sent home from Saipan, what a performance that was. And no, like I say, it was just my father supported them. He supported them the whole way, well, since he was young, back to like when the 60s, obviously relegated in the 70s, watched Liverpool dominate the scene in the 80s as well. So it hasn't always, obviously, when I was younger, United were very, very successful. But for him, it wasn't always that way. So yeah, that's how I came really about to supporting United.
So, look, I'll go to Joe and we'll talk about obviously the Manchester Derby, but let's open up with our experiences of it. So, Joe, Manchester lad, Man City. What's your experiences with the Derby growing up until now?
Growing up, it was weirdly, and I guess still now to an extent, it's a weird sense of anxiety, which I don't get for any other game of football. It's such a weird phenomenon where Champions League finals, FA Cup finals, anything, I'm usually pretty all right until kickoff, but the derby is a different sensation. It's nerves in the pit of your stomach throughout the whole day. Even it used to be a point of torture. Obviously, being at primary school during the mid 2000s, United would regularly batter City.
Mm.
I think the first one I remember distinctly was 2006 when United scored. I think United won 3-1.
Yeah,
And I just remember my dad being really upset in the car. And not quite getting it at the time, but then eventually, like, as you could become more of a fan of football, you realize like, oh, we're being battered by what is the best team in the world at the moment.
You say that, Joe, but I have this perception of when I was younger, and I could be wrong. Like, as good as United were in those years, that like City always got a result against
Mm.
United. It was a real banana skin of a fixture, no matter if there was like 10, 15 places of difference in the table. Like, City always raised their game, and United seemed to struggle against. Well,
right.
that's my perception
Well,
anyway.
well,
It's
Ricey
funny
is.
because that's how I think of United now. Like,
Yeah.
I think like for whatever reason, it's like FA Cup final. I was like, United are going to win. Like, it's just going to happen. Like,
I
that's
was
what
going to
happens in
say.
football.
I was going to say, Ricey, like Joe's never nervous when it comes to every game because they can buy off. You can't buy off a rival.
You
Do you know
got to
what I
buy
mean?
off the refs. You got to buy off the refs. It's the only way you have success in modern football. Inflating
Yeah.
sponsorship deals, buying off refs.
100%. No, Ricey, as we found out with Joe, we talked about his history with the Derby. As you said, you always found a banana skin. Like, how did you care about the Derby because United were winning, or were you more
Yeah,
Liverpool?
yeah. Like it is a weird one because like obviously City are massive rivals, but Liverpool is always a big one as well. Like I think that's just because of the historic nature of the two clubs. It's and obviously United against Liverpool, or sorry, Manchester against Liverpool. That was an extra edge to it. But yeah, I always felt like even United could be flying and City could be really struggling, but they always seem to get a result. And one result that sticks out really in my mind, and the first one I really remember, is that infamous game at Main Road in 2002, where John Goater had like the game of his life. And rewatching that, like it's crazy just seeing Gary Neville get done like that. But yeah, that's my initial memories of it. Like not always good times playing against City.
Yeah. Well, for myself, as a neutral, per se, I've not really had many memories. Because I was growing up watching United beat everyone. Then it came to the point where City started competing. Initially started off as a fan until they took over. In terms of like seeing them put a wee bit up to United. But yeah, that's about my kind of perspective on it. So we'll move on. We'll talk to Ricey in terms of look, I always like to delve into the history of the clubs. And seeing as United is older, can you delve in and explain the history of United first, please?
Yes, I just suppose a rundown of it is that United were founded in 1878, but they obviously weren't always known as Manchester United. They started as Newton Heath, which was a department of the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway Company. So started out as a bit of a pastime for these fellas working on the tracks, and it was something that really took off in the city. And it was in 1902 that they renamed themselves to Manchester United after being served with a winding up order, coming across debts of in today's money of nearly £400,000, which would have been astronomical back then, obviously. So that's why we get the name today. Manchester United is kind of birthed out of that there. So suppose United won the first of their 20 league titles in 1908. Well, it wasn't the Barclays Premier League then. It was known as the old English First Division. And they won the first of the 13 FA Cups in 1909. But after that they really kind of endured a quiet period up until about the 60s, really, whenever they really took off under Matt Busby. But even at that, they had to really rebuild the squad out of the Munich air disaster in 1958. You know, there was, I believe, 20 of the 44 people on board the plane that were killed in that disaster. So Matt Busby had to rebuild the squad. And United weren't exactly, they weren't a wealthy club then. So they think they had to rely on clubs kind of assisting them. I even believe that there was a time when Real Madrid were offering them players just to kind of keep the club afloat, keep them going. So yeah, out of that there, we obviously had, like I say, Matt Busby, who was the manager, and he was a great believer in European competition as a general and trying to grow that in football. And it was his goal for United to dominate really on that stage, or at least to be a force for it. And he achieved that in 1968 when they beat Benfica in the European Cup, becoming the first English team to win it back then. So Busby was kind of the one who like set the blueprint for United in terms of developing if you want to say like a Manchester United player, someone who could perform at the highest stage, but focusing as well on like youth, bringing through players that wanted to play for the club, especially local players as well. And we've seen that really come into fruition when Alex Ferguson took over, and in the 90s when they had the class of 92 that came through the academy and was the real backbone of arguably United's most successful period as a club. When Ferguson, who took over in 86, went on to win 13 Premier League titles, 5 FA Cups and 2 European Cups. So in that period, like, was United's golden years, if you will, really taking on Liverpool and chasing down those 19 league titles that Liverpool had. Unfortunately, couldn't put a dent in the European Cups, really. But winning 3 overall as a club is still a massive achievement, you know. So yeah, United have had a very turbulent history, and you kind of see that, especially now today. 11 years since winning the league, and could be another few years before they really get back to the top table, if we're being honest. Like,
yeah, well, look, as I say, I think the history of United is quite famous in terms of everything you went through, in terms of that Munich disaster and up until the Busby era, and then continue with Sir Alex, and even now through your, as you might say, less glorious years and trouble period, you've still won many a thing. So it's nothing to be sniffed at.
No,
And
you're right.
so, Joe, look, history of City. Can you take us all the way back to 2008, please?
Yeah, that's fully enough when I started as a fan. I
Yeah.
don't know anything about the club from before then. Definitely not.
No,
Um,
can you take us back to West Gorton and back to 1880?
so club started out of a church, St. Mark's in West Gorton. And then they moved to Ardwick, which is where they became the Ardwick Association Football Club.
Mm-hmm.
And then shortly after that, in 1894, they became Manchester City Football Club. And there was a lot of it was a similar sort of story with Manchester United. And one thing I find quite interesting is that both clubs were at the top of the division before they joined the Football League at the time, and they were routinely, swapping players back and forth. And tensions were pretty decent. It was
Yeah.
palatable. They then sort of had a bit of a golden period in the 60s, when they had my like granddad's favorite player, which is Colin Bell, and then Mike Summerby, Francis Lee. I believe they won the first trophy, which is an FA Cup against Leicester during that period. Um, and then as City fans, we all know about the going up to the top leagues, being a founding member of the Premier League, and the yo-yoing and up and down, and the Gillingham game is something that the club have really tried to focus on, because they are I think subconsciously the club are probably a bit sick and tired of the no history thing. So they definitely pontificate, and they definitely build up the Gillingham thing. But yeah, I mean, I'm not no expert on the history of the club in general from that era, but
Hmm.
um since being in the Premier League, they've always been a bit of a darling for some people, because they were never, Manchester United. What Manchester United were winning everything. Um, and I think as well as United, they've always had a lot of focus on local talent and trying to bring through local players. But they've never had that era-defining manager to the global populace like Matt Busby, Alec Ferguson. It was a real struggle for us in those time periods. The 90s especially was a dark period for the club. Um, but yeah, then obviously being bought out by the Abu Dhabi royal family, it's been a completely different story. And as someone who's benefited massively from it in terms of, being able to watch decent football, it's been great for the club. It's been great for the area. They have then tried to promote a lot of those same attitudes that United have historically, from the sounds of it, in that they care about Europe, they care about young players from Manchester, they care about, the local community, and I think that's actually quite an interesting parallel to draw.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if the club would ever outrightly say it, but it is very interesting.
Yeah. No,
Um,
look, I say we all know Manchester's a hotbed of talent from
mm,
for English football. It was interesting to talk about the history of City, and you talk about how you like to hark back to other big historical moments. You talk about
mm.
your first trophy. The first FA Cup you won was in 1904 against
Was it?
Leicester. Yeah, 1904. But
Yeah.
it's a bit dubious because of financial irregularities, which seems to pop up a lot in Man City's history. Um, you had 17
I
players suspended then, so it's all right.
the one I was talking about was the one in the 70s. That was against Leicester, I think. Was it
Yeah,
60s? I think it was the 60s. But
yeah.
Neil Young scored. That's all I know about that one, really.
Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting because obviously Ricey and I have actually played in Ardwick and played in previous places City have played for training. Um, And that's kind of where I was looking at in the history of City is you moved to Moss side in 1923, which became synonymous with the club. United have always had Old Trafford, and Old Trafford is, as Ricey probably has said, as a Wayne, the theatre of dreams. But
I think it's interesting though, because like, yes, United have always had Old Trafford, and I think for a lot of football fans, that is a bit of a mecca. Like it's somewhere, you know, a pilgrimage. It's same as like the Bernabeu is, or Wembley, or wherever the Ireland play.
Lansdowne Road.
Yeah. But they've had that stability, and I think you can tell throughout the history of United that stability has really paid off.
Yeah.
Do
No.
you feel, Joe, just with like obviously moving from Main Road, like you kind of see what's happening to that area of Manchester now in terms of they've taken the stadium and obviously they've moved across the city, the Eastlands. Like you see that area now and it's quite run down, whereas there used to be pubs, there used to be a lot of like just general employment in the area. Now, I think a lot of City fans kind of felt really annoyed by that. Probably the older ones, I get that, like they had that attachment to the ground. But have you any thoughts or anything on that there?
So I never actually visited Main Road. It was before my like footballing curse at the start, but now obviously not. It 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 does hold a special place to people like my dad and my granddad, and I think like I think for them it felt like their ground. It felt like somewhere where they belonged. And I think people were very, very upset about having to move. And I think you're totally right. Like, you know, they took a lot out of the area. And that has obviously had an effect on the area. Have they made up for that by reinvigorating the area where they are at the moment? I don't know. It's a conversation for people who live in those areas. But I do think it's really interesting that City have moved quite frequently, whereas United have always had Old Trafford.
Well, you say that, Joe. Like, if Sir Jim Ratcliffe gets his way, we'll all pay for United's new stadium. So they'll be needing somewhere soon.
And lovely taxpayer money.
Exactly.
All of a sudden those jokes about us being in a fancy rented property will be coming back.
Yeah. Oh, I just remember those days of the council house.
So look, we've learned a bit of the history of both clubs. Let's actually move on to the actual derby itself. Now, the first game was played in 1881, a year after City had become a club, between, as Joe said, St Mark's and Newton Heath. Obviously, two clubs that don't technically exist anymore, because they've got new names. Right, do you know the score of that game?
I don't, Brandon. What was it?
3-0 to Newton Heath.
Which was United at the time, yeah?
Yeah. It was. No, that was the first game between it, but it wasn't the first competitive game. That wouldn't happen for a while after that. But between there's been 194 games since. Who's got a better record?
United. Begrudgingly. Yeah, it is quite a bit. It's I think United have won 70 odd games. City have won 79. City have won 62, is it? Was it 61 now?
61 now.
61.
Catching
up.
Yeah.
Hey, Racey, just you keep drawing. There's 54 draws, gentlemen.
That's all you got to do. Just kick the can down the road.
That's interesting though. Does the Community Shield count as a draw, or was that a win for City?
That counted as a draw.
Okay. There's no stat for wins on penalties then.
There is no stat for wins on penalties now. Sorry. No, it's quite easy to look at the history of the clubs and see. I actually saw a great graphic which showed the history of the clubs and them winning trophies. Through the years of they had every trophy lined out line by line for about nearly 200 years. Not much blue until the last 10 years. So what do we think about that? What do we think about the kind of role of honours between the clubs? Ricey?
Yeah, obviously, like you say, United had a very successful period in the 60s, really. And really, really dominated the 90s and the early 2000s. So built up a head of steam, if you will, in terms of getting those honours under the belt. Now you see City dominating the landscape now. They're cleaning up really in terms of winning trophies like under Guardiola, like trebles, doubles. It's quite impressive, like to pull all that together and to string results together. So yeah, I like for a long time thinking that 20 won't be caught unless Liverpool get themselves together. But you see City knocking it down year after year. We'll see what comes of this next few months in this trial. I hope maybe they'll take a few off them. I think that's the only chance United have of staying ahead of them, really.
Yeah. Well, you've got 10 more than them, so it's fine. You got at least, well, I'd say 11 years. But I can see Arteta working his magic, pickpocketing one away from City. But I look at that, and Joe, this is more of a question, and I'll throw Rice the same question: is has football evolved in such a way that it's not about the rivalry? It's more about being able to say about having a trophy at the end of it, or is it you still want to just get that wee win over the rival?
I mean, for me, I would rather beat United. I don't care how successfully either club. I do. I mean, I do care, but like, I would rather beat United twice and go without a trophy than lose to United both times but win like the league. I think beating your local rivals feels a lot better. Trophies are nice, trophies are great, but I had a long time of my fan period of not having trophies, so it is what it is.
Yeah.
One thing I never take for granted is the trophies, but beating United always feels quite nice because they're your local rivals, and still for me, for quite a long time, they were the club. They were the club that everybody at my school supported apart from me. So yeah, it feels nice to get one over on them. But at the same time, it's not that it's not really. I don't go into the old tribalism and lads who are like going out at the weekend and getting into scraps like over the football. It's like it's really not that much. It's not that deep. Just
Yeah.
celebrate the game and move on.
And Ricey?
Yeah, I think winning trophies has got to be the pinnacle. It's got to be the one you really go after. Like it's obviously, I think to beat City and to beat Liverpool in a season, it adds that extra bit of sweetness. But I think like it's got to be where players and fans have got to look back at trophies won rather than, let's say, places finished in the league or maybe good results. Like I said, that's not to take anything away from it because to beat City it's a nice thing, especially. Well, you killed two birds with one stone. So we did in May there, beating them in the FA Cup final and winning the trophy. City were lucky enough. Well, they done the same to us last season. So I think it's got to be winning trophies, especially if you want to be a top club as well. And City are getting that way. Like I think they are just knocking them out of the park. They're just getting more and more laser focused at winning things, and I feel like as well they don't really need to turn up that much when they play United because the quality is really there. Like it's kind of like they just go into like autopilot, if you will, and they win those. I think it's got to be winning trophies for me. Like I think that's the sweetest of all days.
Out of interest, then. Out of interest.
It sounds like a man who hasn't won a trophy in 11 years.
No, like I said, the FA Cup was sweet. Like even the League Cup last season.
For me, I guess it's kind of a hierarchy then, because like winning trophies is great. Like winning the league, I hold winning the league higher than winning the Champions League because you have to be better over a more consistent period of time. And while I know people are going to be like, "Oh, it's because you've only won it once."
No, I'd agree.
Don't care. Winning the league is far more important than beating United. But if it was the FA Cup or the Carabao Cup, I kind of think beating United's a little bit sweeter.
Yeah. No, to be fair, I don't know. Like I always have this opinion that the FA Cup is a big trophy, but a lot of people don't agree with me. They always think that the league and the Champions League is the big one, but I think the FA Cup's a big trophy to really knock down League Cup, yeah, that one's up for debate, fair enough. But it's still sweet to win it. Like Guardiola likes winning that trophy, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
So look, I put out three derbies that I felt were quite unique in what they were. So I put out the 3-0 win United had over City in 1906. It came straight after the financial scandal at Man City. So maybe we'll have that coming up soon. Where Billy Meredith was found guilty of bribing players on other teams, which is good to know.
Go on,
United,
lad.
Do you know how much he bribed them for?
pardon?
Like, was it like a farthing or something like, or what was it?
It was basically what he was doing was so there was a wage cap back then. You only allowed to pay them a certain amount of money. So what they would do,
right.
what they would do is they would pay players extra money, but they'd also throw extra money to other players. They throw the game, that kind of way. Do you know what I mean? As I say, in total they had 17 players suspended, so they're clearly doing it a lot. Let's see if they get 17 players suspended this time.
Nah, we'll just sell them all to Chelsea. Give Chelsea the first 100-player squad.
But look, United loved the taste of that, so they went and bought Billy Meredith themselves a year later. So I wonder where the success of United came from.
Typical United in the establishment.
I'm sure they can get 40 million for free from COVID. Do you know what I mean?
We're not getting into that now. Right?
Oh no, we just have it right there. We'll talk about now the second one I was going to say, which is City won 1-0. As Joe liked to point out, United had relegated themselves already by 1974. Lad, Aguero won that league by one kick. We all know it. City didn't win another game that season. Do you know what I mean? It was the Dennis Law backheel that relegated. We'll leave it at that. Okay.
Yeah.
The myth is better than the true story.
Yeah.
Obviously, Dennis Law having been part of the Holy Trinity that United had to win the Champions League or the European Cup at the time. He won a Ballon d'Or at United, one of 4 people to win the Ballon d'Or while at United, whereas Man City have no one to win the club. No one to win the Ballon d'Or at the club. Isn't that right, Joe? Yeah.
Apart from George Weah and
where did he win it? Where did he win it?
AC Milan.
Right. An actual club. Sorry. And the final one, which is, I would argue, the modern day massive one, which was the 6-1 hammering in 2011, where changes in the guard happened. Ricey,
yeah,
we quiz for you quickly. Can you name the player that's still playing for United in that team that suffered that 6-1 defeat?
Oh, yes.
Johnny Evans.
It is Johnny Evans.
He was sent off that day too, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
But to be fair, right, wasn't it only 2-1 until he got sent off? So it just shows you how good Johnny Evans is. Like,
he's still there, isn't it?
You know what I mean? Like, he's still there, and yeah. Well, less said about his penalty there and last weekend, the better. But yeah,
I always think of that 6-1 as such a monumental moment of like it. That for me was really the changing of City as a club. I think for before that, when they had the money, I think we still kind of were in the Chelsea era. Like obviously Chelsea won Champions Leagues and whatnot, European Cups, but like we were in the era of throw money at the wall and hope something sticks. Whereas I think after that, I think of the club being quite clinical and quite methodical in their plans for success. You know, going from Mancini chasing Guardiola and not quite getting him, getting Pellegrini instead, and then going for Guardiola. You know, I think of that as a real inflection point at City, definitely.
Just before we finish up, I want to ask you quickly as fans about fans. Like, we have the famous United and the prawn sandwich brigade that Roy Keane famously talked about, where United fans aren't from Manchester, they're from London. Rough streets are from Anna. Asia, America. City fans are from City, so you've got 10. So, what is the fan kind of belief behind both clubs? Do you actually have fans, or is just money models now?
Do you want to go first, Joe, or will I on this? I don't mind
Yeah,
either.
yeah, because I think I've been thinking about this a lot. And I think it's really weird at the moment because I think it being a successful club, but having been, like I said, everybody's sort of like uh not second team, but everybody's like darlings, like, oh well, I like City because they're not United. It's really interesting now seeing that success, and I think a lot of quote unquote plastic fans are people that don't really care about football, but like the fact that they have something in their life that's successful to model themselves about. And I think the same can be said for United. It's why people jump on the bandwagon for, NBA teams, artists, other celebrities. And I think City have got a lot of that at the moment. They are trying really hard to be the team in America. I think we've gone on a tour there at least 2 of the last 3 years. Um, so it's a really weird point in time, and I'm sure United have this as well, where you have people who've supported United all their life, live in Manchester, support City all their life, live in Manchester, and I think when you go to a City game now, you do look around and you see like, oh, there are a lot of tourists here, particularly Champions League games. Um, and I'll hold my hands up and say I was one of those coming from Dubai, going to one game a year, um, until I moved back to Manchester. But yeah, it is a bit weird. You never want to see local fans getting priced out of games, but I fear that that is kind of happening at both clubs a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
right. So,
Just on that, just to add to that, like you say, yeah, you're going to get fans from abroad following. Like for example, I'm Irish and I'm a United fan, but like I think when you're a successful club as well, you're going to draw successful players from different countries. So, for
Mm,
example, you're saying like Roy Keane there earlier, arguably, like, he's definitely a legend at United, like
mm,
in terms of what he done. So, he's going to have that pull from Irish people and also where the effect of the club in terms of immigration as well. That can't be ignored. Like a massive city in England will draw in people again
yeah.
from abroad, like Irish as well throughout the years, or it could be anybody from Asia or anywhere. Like, so you're going to have that effect. But I feel like the foreign fan really took off, I suppose, I believe it was in maybe late 90s or early 2000s when
Mm,
I believe that Ferguson was a real, he spearheaded that for United. Like he got United out of the gates before anybody in terms of that global market and
mm,
playing games abroad. And obviously being successful at that time as well, winning trophies, you had that like double whammy there of like, oh well, they're getting that international audience, they're getting that
mm,
appeal, and that's why United, well, a large reason of why United are such a revenue driver as well, because like I said,
mm.
they got out the gates before most English teams. They garnered that support, and yeah, you see how big the fan base is now all around the world. So yeah, I believe that. But also that thing that stick the City fans beat United with in terms of like not being from Manchester. I think they know deep down there's a lot of Reds in Manchester, just as there's a lot of Blues in Manchester too. Like
hmm.
I mean, my dad will always say there's only one team in Manchester. There's two teams in Greater Manchester. You know what I mean? Like it just is what an older generation of fan would say. And I'm sure he won't mind me calling him old, but that, I think like football has become such a global commodity now. It is, and that's one of my problems with the game, is it is a consumer item. It's no longer about like, as silly as it sounds, having fun and enjoying a game. It's living and dying. It's almost a religion. And I think
Hmm.
United were one of the first teams to really capitalize on that consumerism and push themselves into new markets. And I think they did a fantastic job of marketing the brand of Manchester United, equaling success. And City are trying to do that now. I mean, people talk about the Manchester City like structure and the way, and it is really interesting looking at it because there are a lot of parallels to how United used to operate, um,
yeah,
and ripping that model from them and trying to be what Manchester United are for modern audiences.
yeah, I
Well,
agree with that.
I would say like you can't forget where City are. You know what I mean?
Mm.
They've got that many 0-1 6-1s on their shirts or
Ah,
wherever. You know
I
what I mean?
hate it.
You can't forget really.
It's so cringe. It is so cringe. It's terrible. But I love the away kit. That's great. Like the neon one. But then again, they're like, oh, it's the Gillingham thing, and like I get it. Like we all get it, you know.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, it could be worse. You could be a Dutch side playing in red in Manchester.
Yeah, Ajax old boys.
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
I'm going to ask you this. Like, I asked you about the fans and about how you're perceived as having no fans from where you're from. But what about the actual, as you say, Joe, your dad was there and he loves seeing the games in terms of wanting to get one over on your local rivals.
Hmm.
But we've seen more and more, and maybe it's just because of social media, maybe it's just because of this, so and that. But what about the hatred between the clubs? Like I know you said, and I said as well, that early on it was just a kind of, oh, you beat us, Oscar, you beat us.
Yeah, yeah.
But now it's turned into a visceral hatred at times where you're getting people chanting about the Munich air disaster. Then you get
Yeah.
people shouting about the rags they had to use because of that period.
I don't think that
And
has any place in football, like at all. Like a lot of City fans forget that the clubs were in such good standing with each other that City gave players to United to try and help them put a team out. I think a lot of City fans forget that, and they also forget like those are like actual people, like at the end of those, that died, and it's not great to make light of the fact of that or make a joke about it. I think it's quite gross. It's disgusting. I agree with Guardiola when he says there's no place for it in football.
yeah, and Risa, yourself.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. Obviously, in football, like it's this tragedy chanting is like it's
Mm,
always been a problem. I think it's only now in the last few years the media are talking about it. Like, but
mm,
it's always been a problem. Like being at United games and seeing fans making the airplane gesture. Like I know, like Leeds fans are very bad for that.
mm,
Like it's just what can I do to get under the skin of people? But with City United, like again, it's an individual. But I remember the incident at the Etihad when it was Fred that scored and
mm.
the fan doing like the monkey gesture to him. Like I think they're isolated incidents, unfortunately, within football. Like I wouldn't say that that's the City fan base, not a chance. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I obviously don't get me wrong. I hope City gets slapped with this like financial case and all the rest. But in terms of like wishing actual ill upon them and actually like bringing up really bad points in their history, I think yeah, a lot of United fans, unless they're doing it tongue in cheek, like they're not really on board with that kind of thing. Like it's yeah, unfortunately the minority are made out to be a majority. Like
Well, do you two feel, and like this is just going to kind of summarize as fans, and this point is, do you feel part of the clubs as fans? Like, I know back in the day, in the 50s, you would have been able to walk into a bar and probably had a drink with George Best, most than likely, if you're at United. Um, would you be able to walk into a bar? Would you be able to feel as part of the club? Or do you feel part of the club now? Sorry, maybe I have to rephrase the question of as fans, or do you just feel as kind of consumers? What do you feel?
Bryce, do you want to go first?
yeah, yeah. Okay, like especially the last maybe what 30 years, however old the Premier League is. I think that's really when football moved from a community asset to like something that could be sold off in terms in the name of capitalism. I think clubs, no matter who they are, will continue to price fans out and they will keep pushing those boundaries until fans push back. So I suppose you've seen with like the European Super League, for example, like the Glazers, who are owners of United, they're one of the main people behind that there. I believe Joel Glazer was going to be the president or CEO or something of the European Super League. Zero consideration for the fans, but that's not surprising with the Glazers. Like that's United fans have always had a problem with them. But I think as well, like with the TV deal and stuff like that, like people have ways around watching games nowadays thanks to technology. And I feel like as a fan, you're always trying to like maybe peer over the wall, trying to get in. Unless you're a wealthy fan, you're not really welcomed in the door anymore. And
Mm.
unfortunately, that's just the way a lot of football teams have went. I'm sure, Joe, you probably feel something similar about the way the City have gone. Like,
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Unless you're a wealthy fan, you're not welcome. I think that sucks. I think the inflection point for me was the Super League when City were like, we're joining. That's when the blue curtain fell, and I was like, oh, we're no longer this anti-establishment for the community club. We were willing to sell out our fans in the name of an extra revenue stream, and I really dislike that. That doesn't sit right with me. So yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
I think the European Super League there, that really highlights the divide between like owners of clubs and fans. That there is really it. You know, that shows you the divide. So I suppose to answer your question, Brandon, like you feel part of the club as long as you have money. But I don't think that would stop me in terms of like feeling like United are my club, because I put like decades into them in terms of watching them, following them, taking an interest, being annoyed when they don't do well, being ecstatic when they do well. So you know, that can't be taken away from me. So I think you just kind of have to find another way of like supporting your team and ignoring those ways of like owners trying to get that few pound out of your pocket, which is the way the game in general has gone. Like,
yeah, I agree with that. It's hard to stop being a fan of something you've been a fan of for 20 odd years now. It is just the way it is. I think you're right. There needs to be some pushback from fans, definitely. Something needs to be done
if we
because,
could
like,
unionize, all
fucking unionize the fans
against each other. If City, United, Liverpool fans, Arsenal fans, instead of pointing out the flaws of each club, say that we're all flawed and like actually get something done for the game. But nah, that's not going to happen. Like,
no.
And how do you see the future of the rivalry going? Now, like you'll have United in the Premier League, and you'll have National League champions probably next year, Man City.
That's if we can buy it. That's if we can buy the National League.
I've got faith in Rico Lewis being good enough.
He'll be gone. He will be. We won't be keeping anybody that good.
Scott Carson.
He might get a game. Scott Carson might get a game, actually. Yeah. Good for him though. He's had a great career. He's got the best job in the world,
Yeah.
2 Champions Leagues, never played him on it.
Yeah, exactly. But unfortunately, I kind of see the rivalry just getting more and more toxic.
Yeah.
That tribalism in football is just continuing to grow, and it's one of the reasons why I'm like, nah, I'm good. I don't want to be arguing on Twitter with 12-year-olds like about like how good certain players were that they've never even watched.
Do you mean like Hendrick's favorite player being Bobby Charlton?
Yeah, what is that? what is that? What a spoofer, like
all the YouTube clips.
Do you know what I mean? Like, what a random answer to give.
Maybe he had him on Ultimate Team. Maybe that's why he loves him. That
would actually go a long way to explaining it. Maybe you're onto something there, Joe.
But like, my favorite player for ages was Richard Dunn, and it's like most people now are like, you mean the guy who's like on the telly, and it's like,
you know what I mean?
I mean, he did play for City, but yeah, he's on the telly as well now.
He's actually Richard Dunn was good. I don't like the way this Richard Dunn slander has got about.
It's the own goals, man. It's the own goals. That's all it is.
if anyone watches his performance against Russia, where he took a bash to the face, you'll know how good he is.
That meme, it's like send in the Russians. There are no more Russians. And him just covered in blood. What a guy. What a guy.
But unfortunately, I see it getting a lot more toxic. I see the financial fair play thing, I feel like is going to be really, really interesting, because although I think if we're found guilty, we should, and I mean, we absolutely are guilty, but if they can prove it and they punish us, you kind of have to hold your hand up and say, yeah, we deserve it. But I strangely don't think we're going to get caught, because I think I just have a weird feeling that they're not going to get caught, and I think that's going to make things worse, because everybody is then shit's just going to hit the fan. Sorry if I don't know if I can swear on this or not, but
yeah, you can. It's fine. Don't worry, we can do that.
Football in general is just going to become weird, just a weird sort of like.
It's already weird with Elliot Anderson going to who was it Forest for 40 million.
Yeah. Just I really don't like it.
It's your
It
call.
feels almost like the WWE. Like it's scripted, surely.
Yeah. And Ricey, how do you see the future going as a United fan?
Like for the rivalry, probably Joe's spot on there. Like it's definitely probably going to become more toxic. You see that just in everyday society. It's kind of depressing to see. But I think you'll always have those level-headed fans that will enjoy the rivalry for what it is. I can also see like in terms of like the financial stuff, like the only loser out of that really is the Premier League. Premier League's going to lose no matter what. Whether City get punished or whether they don't get punished, it's Premier League's going to lose because they're either going to damage the game or they've already damaged the game by allowing City to get this far with it. But let's say that let's go with the hypothetical scenario that City don't get they get a slap on the wrist, they get a fine, whatever it is, and they stay as successful as they are, or they still still stay a dominant force. And United get their act together under this new part ownership under the Ineos group. Now that's going to take a few years. I'm under no impression it's going to be a quick fix. It's not like United have a lot of problems that they have to fix, but I do have this belief and hope that like United can get it together, that they can sort themselves out, because even as you said, Brendan, during those like the last few years, the last 11 years, where they haven't won major honors, if you want to call it that, they've still managed to hang thereabouts. They've still managed to collect trophies. So I can see a period in the next maybe 5-10 years where United and City and possibly Liverpool are really back at the top table again, like really challenging for it. But a lot of things have to go right for United. You know what I mean? Whereas City are already there. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things in play. It's hard to know how exactly it'll go, but definitely agree with Joe in terms of it being definitely getting more toxic. That's a given.
You don't want to see it go that way, like any stretch of the imagination. Like I've always said, it's weird. I come from a split family, so my mum's side are all United fans, where my dad's are all blue. But I've always said to my nan, like I would like United to be good, because then when your two teams at the top of the world are both from Manchester, it's quite nice. You know,
that period in the early like tens, like whenever
yeah,
United and City were kind of like swapping the league title for a bit. I'll admit that was good. Like that was good for especially Manchester in general being at the top of the English game. You know, it was I'll agree with you there, Joe.
Titles mean more and hurt more when you're doing it neck and neck with your rivals. You know,
we're not going to talk about Aguero, hey.
And that's kind of the thing, isn't it? Like sport means more when you're doing it against your rivals.
It does, and I think you see that in every sport. So you do. And look, in terms of this and this rivalry, has it opened up any new information to you? Is different fans, different clubs? Have you appreciated the other club more, or do you still hate each other?
Do you want to go first, Joe?
I don't hate United as much as I did when I was 10. I'll put it that way. I used to like put on FIFA, plug a second controller in and score 100 goals against United when they beat us in a derby. Like that was my way of like dealing with that process. But like I don't hate United as much as I did when I was younger. Just and I don't know if that's because they have like fallen away in the way that they have, or if it's because I'm older and able to deal with that emotion a lot better. But no, I don't hate United to the extent that some City fans do, definitely.
Yeah, hate's a strong word. Hey, there's like probably I wouldn't put City in the hate group. Obviously, yeah, I don't like seeing you do well, and it really annoys me to see that. Like, but see you winning titles. But in terms of like learning stuff about them, I don't know. What I did remember rather than learn is like I kind of forgot about that 6-1. It was like a trauma response. Do you know what I mean? I obviously buried it, and then seeing it again there is like, oh yeah.
I can send you the YouTube video if you want. I've got it, so I can pull it up somewhere.
I can still see like Jacko scoring. I can still see Balotelli.
Oh, that David Silva pass. Oh,
like,
wonderful.
Do you know what I mean? I think it was Fletcher that got our one, but like
it was a lovely goal as well, Fletcher's.
Yeah. No, okay. Look, at the end of the day, like you have to respect City, like as much as it pains me to say it, because like you can have all the money in the world, but they've pulled it together, and they're pulling it together. Or sorry, they're consistently pulling it together. 4 league titles now in a row, possibly 5. Like it is mad. Like it's mad times to be living in. So yeah. Not really learned too much more about City, but like I say, have that respect for them in general. Like good club, obviously part of Manchester, massive part of Manchester. So yeah, we'll
Where are
see.
you,
We'll see.
Brem? Where are you with it? Do you hate both clubs equally, or
Equally, not particularly. Um,
I imagine you hate City more because of what we've kind of like done to the game, quote unquote.
Yeah, that's a big factor. That's a big factor.
yeah, you weren't the first to do it. You have just perfected it.
Can I have the copy of this recording? Because I kind of need that to remind you of when you're making fun of us.
Pardon?
Can I have like that recording of you saying that so that when we get relegated to the National League, I
Mm.
can remind you of that.
Yeah, don't worry. This will go up. Don't worry, all of it will be there. Um, but no, honestly, like growing up in Ireland, similar to Ricey, like it was just United fans left, right, and centre. Not one of them had been to England probably, and that
Hmm.
was frustrating. Do you know what I mean? Like it was annoying seeing that. It was annoying United growing up. But now that United and my uncle and my grandfather are both massive United fans, season ticket holders for up until last year. Um, I'm not a fan at all, but it was always annoying hearing them enjoying their football.
Hmm.
Um,
When you had to
seeing
deal
them,
with Roy Hodgson.
yeah. But like in terms of that, like City, as I said to me, were a savior for a while until I realized how bad it was for football.
Hmm.
How the experiment they did is now going to be used again for Newcastle, and
Hmm.
if they break the rules and they get away with it, what is football? It's not a club. It's
Hmm.
not for fans anymore. It's just about it's another kind of politic in terms
Hmm.
of the way the Olympics were used back in the 80s by the Soviets and the Americans.
Hmm.
Rich countries are now buying up football clubs to show how great their country is.
Hmm.
So for me, I don't hate either. I dislike them both very, very strongly. Um, I'll put it that way. And look, I'll get tons of abuse from United fans, and I'll get 10 City fans because that's all they have. So
Hmm.
give him
You've
a.
used the same joke. You've used the same joke 3 times. Have you got any more?
Have you ever seen The Simpsons? Do you know when he does that Rick joke? And it's the constant repeat. It works.
I think just on that, like the City Chargers thing, and I know Joe's probably fed up hearing about it, but it
No,
is
no, not at
it's a
all. I've not
massive.
read like four
I
athletic
think
articles on it.
one thing I've been thinking of is like if City are found to be guilty, they've skewed the landscape in terms of what we define as an achievement. So, like for example, obviously winning the treble when they did, and like kind of eclipsing United's '99 team. Now, if City are found to have broken the rules building that team and getting their dominance, it does take the shine off United's '99 treble team, or maybe you could argue maybe it even makes it a better achievement that someone had to cheat to get to that level, if you get what I mean. But I think I could find a level of hate for City if they are found guilty because of like just I don't know, just the way, like I say, skewing the landscape and just
See,
taking honors and achievements from people and players that they've been robbed of, really. But we'll see what comes of that. Like we'll see. Like
so
Lord
right.
Panic might have his real day in court, like and sort the Premier League out.
Well, Racey, I was going to say, just in defense of City for once in my life, and in defense of Joe, that City treble where they had bought up all the talent, they have bought up their way there, which I see them as guilty, but that doesn't mean anything in court. Joe sees them as guilty and all this. I think we all realize that they've done some mishandling, but then you have to remember back to United's treble of
Hmm.
1999. Which country had to spend the most money on players?
Yeah,
Arguably
nah.
England. United had assembled a team full of stars. Their issue was mentally, which was City's issue as well. Then once he did
Hmm.
it, and I know you can be all like, "Oh, it's a different time." Look, they still did a treble after spending so much more money than anyone else in England. arguably. Like, it takes a shine maybe off cities because they spend maybe more, but still, United didn't earn it. Like, United aren't Celtic that won the Champions League where everyone was born within a mile of the stadium.
Yeah. You're never
It's
going to get
not
that
that.
again. Like,
No.
it
No,
won't
you're not.
happen. But I also think like you shouldn't be able to leverage debt against the club continuously, because now like Everton have been found guilty of that with like 7-7 partners and all that kind of thing. So like United have done that for years. That's now against Premier League rules. Why do we not associate that with cheating? That's my like
I think that's
argument
a little
almost.
bit. I think that's a little bit different though, because like
Or should,
United didn't necessarily gain a sporting advantage there. Like, if anything, they were like bad ownership has run them into the ground. It's not like they were like what the Glazers were doing, unfortunately, and shouldn't have been. It was legal, and they were allowed to do it. They were allowed to buy the club with a loan from the bank, which no United fan wanted. Whereas if you look at City now, you've got defenders and cheerleaders do it for what has happened at City. So I don't know if you can draw comparisons with that there, but I agree that should never have been allowed for United. Like, the Glazers should never have been allowed to do that at any turn. Like,
And I do agree, City shouldn't have been allowed to inflate sponsorship deals, but like you know, still United did gain a little bit of an advantage because he was still able to sign good players.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it's not like they weren't able, they missed out on Ronaldo and Rooney because of that. They
yeah.
got ahead because of their good scouting, but you
Look,
know,
this isn't like a poor we United, like, defense or anything for me. It's not like, United spent money. They broke the British transfer record many a time. I'm not denying that at all. We'll just see what happens, I suppose.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's all we can do.
Unfortunately, we're going to see what happens. Unfortunately,
look, in my thought, look, and as Joe asked me, what do I think of both clubs? Clearly, now I've learned in the last 5 minutes they're both cheats, which is a lovely way to sum up and say thank you to both Joe and Ricey for helping delve into this derby.
Thanks very much.
thank you very much.